In 1969, Ford launched a coupe that looked like a sports car but was built from humble family car parts. Across Germany, BMW's 2002 was winning praise for brilliant engineering and razor-sharp handling. Yet it was the Ford Capri 3000 GT that captured buyers in far greater numbers. How did the simpler car outsmart the better one? Start with the name, because even that was an accident of bad timing. Ford's internal code name for the project was Colt, a nod to the same wild horse imagery that had made the Mustang a sensation in America. Development got the green light in July 1966, with a budget of around £20 million. One of the early designers on the project was Philip T. Clark, an American stylist also associated with the original Mustang, though the finished car passed through several more hands, British and German, before it reached production. Everything about the brief said European pony car, but by the time the coupe was ready for production, Ford discovered that Mitsubishi had already trademarked the name Colt for their own cars. Ford had to scrap it at the 11th hour and reach back into their own history for an old, unused name from a 1961 Consul variant, Capri. That near miss on the name is a small detail, but it hints at something bigger about how this car was built. Fast, under budget, and constantly borrowing from what already existed rather than inventing from scratch. And nowhere is that clearer than in the decision that actually made the whole project possible. Ford did give the Capri its own floor pan, a genuinely new piece of engineering. But almost everything bolted to that floor pan came straight out of the parts bin. The suspension mounting points, the braking system, and the running gear were all lifted from the humble Ford Cortina Mark II. The same unglamorous family saloon sitting in driveways across Britain. That wasn't laziness, it was arithmetic. A brand new coupe built with entirely bespoke mechanical components would have taken years longer to develop and would have needed its own dedicated tooling, its own spare parts catalogue, and its own trained mechanics at every dealership. By hanging the Capri's new body on Cortina-derived suspension and brakes, Ford could have the car in showrooms within 3 years of approval. Built alongside the Cortina at the Halewood plant in Liverpool, serviced by any Ford garage in the country, using parts already sitting on the shelf. The glamorous long bonnet coupe and the practical family saloon in the next bay looked nothing alike. But underneath the skin, they were close relatives. That same logic explains a choice that looks, at first glance, like Ford simply being behind the times. The live rear axle, sitting on leaf springs, at a moment when BMW and other serious manufacturers were already moving to independent rear suspension. It's tempting to read that as an engineering shortcoming. It wasn't. A live axle is heavy and unsophisticated, but it's also cheap to produce, extremely simple to service, and tough enough to shrug off a decade of potholed British B roads without complaint. Crucially, it was already being manufactured, in huge numbers, for the Cortina. Fitting it to the Capri meant zero new tooling, and a part every Ford mechanic in Europe already knew how to fix. For a car aimed at buyers who wanted the look of a sports car but the running costs of a family hatchback, that trade-off wasn't a compromise forced on the engineers, it was the plan. The same thinking shaped the single decision that turned the Capri from one car into an entire family of cars. Ford built the coupe's engine bay and front subframe generously enough that it could accept almost anything already sitting in the company's parts bin. The Kent 4-cylinder in 1.3 and 1.6-litre form for buyers who mostly cared about economy, the British-built Essex V4 in 2.0-litre form for a step-up in mid-range pull, and finally, added to the range in September 1969, the 3.0-litre Essex V6 for the flagship 3000 GT. One body shell, one badge, one dealer network, but 4 completely different ownership experiences, depending on which engine a customer could afford. Nobody else in Europe was selling a car that could be, quite literally, either an economical commuter or a 120-mile-per-hour coupe, built on the same line from the same starting point. The range-topping 3000 GT used the Essex V6 to produce around 128 horsepower, weighed roughly 1,105 kilograms, and had a claimed top speed of about 113 miles per hour, genuinely brisk for the era, and wrapped in a shape designed to look faster still. The long bonnet suggested an engine with far more cylinders than it had. Sculpted creases and fake air intakes along the front wings borrowed visual cues from cars costing several times the price. None of it changed the numbers. All of it changed how the numbers felt behind the wheel. Now put the BMW 2002 next to it, because the contrast is where this story actually earns its title. BMW's engineers weren't dressing up a family car. The 2002 grew out of the Neue Klasse program, a deliberate attempt to rebuild BMW's entire identity around a new class of buyer. Young professionals who wanted precision, not chrome. The engine at the heart of it, the M10, was designed years earlier by Alex von Falkenhausen, with a piece of foresight most manufacturers never bother with. He built the cast iron block with unusually generous bore spacing from the very start, specifically so the same basic engine could later be grown from 1.3 litres all the way up to 2.0 litres without a fundamental redesign. The 2.0-litre version that ended up in the 2002 wasn't the product Falkenhausen originally set out to build. It happened almost by accident, after he and BMW's own director of product planning separately fitted the bigger engine to their personal cars, unaware the other had done exactly the same thing, and only discovered it when both vehicles turned up for servicing on the same afternoon. Underneath, the 2002 backed up that engine with fully independent suspension on all four corners, McPherson struts at the front and semi-trailing arms at the rear, laid out to keep the car's weight balanced close to evenly between the front and rear axles, a target BMW's engineers would chase across every generation that followed. That's the kind of chassis balance sports car makers spend years chasing. The Capri, by contrast, put a heavy iron V6 out ahead of the front axle and hung it on the same live rear axle it borrowed from a saloon car. On a twisting road, driven hard, there was no contest. The BMW would simply do more of what a driver asked of it, more precisely, corner after corner. And that's exactly why outsmarted is the right word, rather than outperformed. The Capri never won the engineering argument, and Ford never seriously tried to make it. What Ford built instead was a spread of buyers so wide that BMW's superior single product could never chase it down. The 2002 asked a customer to already understand, and already want, semi-trailing arms and bore spacing foresight. Real virtues, but ones that take a knowledgeable buyer or a proper test drive to notice. The Capri simply needed a customer to glance at a long bonnet and picture themselves behind the wheel of something quicker than it actually was, at whichever price point they could stretch to. One strategy demanded that buyers come to the car already convinced. The other met buyers exactly where their budget was, 4 times over. The sales figures settled the debate. Within 2 years, the Capri had attracted around 400,000 buyers, and by the end of production, nearly 1.9 million had been built across Britain and Europe. Ford succeeded by offering stylish performance at a price ordinary buyers could afford. Meanwhile, the BMW 2002 earned its place through engineering excellence and became the blueprint for future sports saloons. One won the admiration of enthusiasts, the other won the loyalty of millions, and both became automotive icons.